Okay, small groups, let's open up our Bibles to Mark chapter 10. Today we're going to be looking at verses 32 to 45, and we're calling this the unexpected journey. And I want to start, as we do, with a question. What are you expecting from a pursuit of God? You know, everyone has expectations when you first start following Jesus. In fact, some people these days, those, prosperity gospel preachers on TV, they tell you that you can expect health and wealth and prosperity. But we're going to see that that's actually not a biblical concept. Jesus never promises that. Let's go to the text. Verse 32, it says, "The disciples were now on the way up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them. They were filled with awe, and the people following behind were overwhelmed with fear. Taking the 12 disciples aside, Jesus once more began to describe everything that was about to happen to him. So Jesus is now getting focused on his mission as he makes his way to Jerusalem. I think that's what it means when it says the disciples were filled with awe. They could tell that Jesus was intent. This is the point where Jesus' public ministry is narrowing down, and now he's starting to focus from here on out on the cross. But notice it seems to say that there were some people following behind the 12 disciples who were afraid. And this is interesting to modern readers especially. You know, they didn't really know what to expect as they were following Jesus. Maybe that's how some of you feel. Maybe it feels a little bit like wandering into the unknown. What's going to happen as I continue to follow Jesus? What will it cost me? For many people, this really can overwhelm us with fear and anxiety and a ton of questions. Well, Jesus answers at least some of their questions in verse 33. Listen, he said, "We're going up to Jerusalem, where the Son of Man will be betrayed to the leading priests and the teachers of religious law. They will sentence him to die and hand him over to the Romans. They will mock him, spit on him, flog him with a whip, and kill him. But after 3 days, he will rise again." Now, if you've been following along in this Gospel of Mark series with us, you'll notice that this is the third time Jesus talks about his death and resurrection. But this time he gets more explicit than before. Compare this passage to chapter 8, verse 31, and chapter 9, verse 31. And when you do that, you're going to notice that we've had a little pattern develop here for us. Okay, here's the pattern. First, Jesus reveals his mission, like what he's doing right here. Next, the disciples say something really stupid. Again, go back to chapters 8 and 9, and you'll see that pattern. And then finally, Jesus turns it into a teachable moment. Well, we're going to see that same pattern right here in chapter 10 now. Because here's the stupid thing that James and John say after Jesus reveals his mission. It says, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came over and spoke to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do us a favor." And Jesus said, "What's your request?" And they replied, "When you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in places of honor next to you, one on your right and the other on your left." If you read this passage in the ESV, they actually say, "We want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." They're asking Jesus, for like a blank check here. And think about what they're asking for. They want glory. They want prosperity. But look at what Jesus is going to offer them. Verse 38, Jesus said, "You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering I'm about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering I must be baptized with?" See, Jesus is pointing them back to literally what he just had said about his death and resurrection, about his true mission. So James and John are framing all of this in terms of glory, and yet Jesus is framing all of it in terms of suffering. And here's what they responded. "Oh, yes, we are able to drink this cup of suffering." I mean, how crazy. James and John are still not getting it. They really thought that they could keep this checklist and earn their way into God's good favor, into his grace. They're essentially saying, this is all about us. If we do this for you, what can you do for us? It kind of reminds me of maybe the most misquoted verse in the whole Bible, Philippians 4:13, "For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." So many people today quote this verse because they think it's all about being great. They think it's all about receiving glory for yourself. But look at the context of the verse. Verse 12, I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. So, Paul isn't talking in this passage about you being great. He's talking about being willing to drink the cup of suffering. Back to Mark 10, verse 41. When the 10 other disciples heard what James and John had asked, they were indignant. So Jesus called them together, and here's what he said. This is the teaching moment. You know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus brings the focus right back to what we started with in this passage, his personal mission, his death and his resurrection. He himself will give up his life as a ransom for many, and he's going to set an example for his disciples to follow. What does that mean? He gets all the glory and we get all the grace. The more we follow Jesus, the less we're interested in our own glory and the more we're interested in his. So let's go back to that question that we started with. What are you expecting from a pursuit of God? Jesus doesn't promise health and wealth and prosperity. In fact, you might suffer as you follow Jesus, but it's worth it. You'll get everything you needed, but nothing you expected.